Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I want to welcome everyone to our 8th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Vayishlach, and it's a packed parsha. We have the beginning where we had the confrontation between Esav and Yaakov, where Yaakov sends messengers, or these messengers are really angels. We have the story of Dinah as well. So, the beginning of the parsha, the Torah says that Yaakov sent angels ahead of him to Esav, his brother, in the land of Seir, the field of Edom, and he charged them, saying, "This is what you shall say to my lord and to Esav. So said your servant Yaakov, I have sojourned with Lavan, I have lingered until now, I have acquired oxen, donkeys, flocks, servants, and maidservants. I'm sending to tell my Lord to find favor in your eyes." So this is where the Torah portion starts, chapter 32, verse 4 to verse 6. So the first thing is that the Torah tells us, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim. Yaakov sent malachim. Now, malachim, normally, we could understand it as messengers, right? Because that's what it means. But here, it means that Yaakov sent Esav, he sent them angels. Now, the obvious question would be, why, when he's going to have this big confrontation, why does he send them? Why does Yaakov send to Esav? Why does he send these messengers who are angels? Now, if they're to give over a message, and don't forget that Esav grew up in the house of Yitzhak. So because Esav grew up in the house of Yitzhak, so he knew what Ruchnius was. He understood what spirituality was. But what does Yaakov send? Yaakov sends a whole flock, right? What Yaakov sends, oxen, donkey, flocks, servants, maidservants, to find favor in Esav's eyes. So even though he sends them angels, and you're going to ask, like, well, what in the world is Esav going to do when he sees these angels? Like, you think, Esav was going after desire and basically destroyed himself. He grew up in the house of Yitzhak. So he understands what spirituality is, but why should he care? He gave up the blessing for a bowl of lentils, right? The blessing didn't mean that much to him. But here Yaakov does something else. Yaakov sends him all these flocks and these maidservants and whatever. So we understand that Yaakov really had the blessing of Olam Haba. That Yaakov is a spiritual inheritor to the next world. So who gets this world? This world is really supposed to be inherited by Esav, right? But the blessing that Yitzhak gives is that Esav is going to be subordinate to Yaakov in this world. Now that should mean physically and spiritually. Now we understand spiritually that we have the upper hand because God gave us a Torah. But physically speaking, we see that it seems that Esav has the upper hand. So the Medrash tells us that when we're doing the right thing, meaning the Jewish people, so they're going to have the upper hand, right? In this world and in the spiritual world. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, then Esav has the upper hand. So it's always would seem to be going like this. We do the right thing, we're like this. We do the wrong thing, we do like this. But Yaakov's sending Esav a message. Esav's all excited and he says, look, my brother Yaakov has all this wealth. Really, he stole my blessing, and that's really why I hate him, because he took this physical world, right? That was the blessing that he got. So here, if he's got so much wealth, so Esav thinks, he's got so much wealth, guess what? That means that he's given up his spiritual realm. That means he doesn't want to have any connection to his spiritual realm. So that means I have the upper hand in the physical world and even in the spiritual world, even though he doesn't have a connection to the spiritual world. But if Yaakov doesn't have the spiritual world, and he's only going in the physical world, then he has nothing. Right? Then he has absolutely nothing. So, what does Yaakov do? Yaakov sends him a message. And the message is that I'm going to send you angels. But we said before, who cares? Esav doesn't have a connection to spirituality. He's given up his connection to spirituality, even though he grew up in the house of Yitzhak. At the same time, Yaakov says, you know what? You're right. God gave me physical wealth as well. But I'm sending you angels. Why am I sending you angels? I'm sending you angels to make the point that I haven't given up spirituality. I still have a very strong connection to spirituality. So don't think, oh, he's got all this wealth, I'm going to take over because the physical world is mine. Even though God gave him a portion in the physical world and he's tremendously wealthy, he still has spirituality. And he sends the messengers. He sends these angels exactly to give over that point. So says the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, he says by the Akedah, by the binding of Isaac, that the Torah says, "V'lo asachta es bincha es yechidcha mimeni." It says, you haven't left over your son, your treasured son from me, meaning that you're going to bring up your, the son that you love, most, i.e. Yitzhak, you're going to bring him on the altar, right? And you're not going to leave him behind from me. So says the Vilna Gaon, when it says Es Yechidcha Mimeni, what does it mean from me? That's what the word Mimeni means, right? What does it mean Mimeni, from me? It means that Avraham created an angel when he was about to kill Yitzhak. In other words, he takes the knife and he's ready to kill him, and then he hears the angel say, Avram, he says, here I am. He says, don't kill him, and he sees the ram and he kills the ram. So the Mesiris Nefesh, the fact that he was willing to go so far to kill his beloved son, that God told him was going to be his offspring and his future spiritual heir, who would pass that down to Yaakov. And and from Yaakov would come the Jewish people. Even though it totally didn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. He goes and he does what God tells him to do. Because he did that with such Mesiris Nefesh, that he was willing to give up, a tremendous amount to do this. Right? He was willing to sacrifice the life of his son, even though it didn't make sense. For doing that mitzvah, and there are mitzvahs that we do, that we sacrifice everything we have in order to do the mitzvah, whatever the mitzvah is. So the Vilna Gaon over here says that every mitzvah you do, because of this, we create an angel. Right? There was an angel created because he was willing to go so far in order that, even though it didn't make sense to kill his own son, to kill his future, so to speak, and the future of the Jewish people. Nonetheless, he listened to what God did, even though it was very hard. So, we do mitzvahs that, sometimes they're easy, and sometimes we have to do it with great effort. So this mitzvah that he did with great effort, right, created an angel. And Avram understood the power of this angel, because when we do mitzvahs, as we learn here from the Gaon, depending how we do the mitzvah, we create an angel. We create, if we did the mitzvah properly, with proper intention. Again, we're not talking Kabbalistic intention. Proper intention, I knew what I was doing, I did it for the sake of the mitzvah, etc. So you create a very strong, powerful angel. If I do the mitzvah in a wimpy way, my language, you make a blessing, let's say over, you're eating an apple, and you eat the apple. Right? You say it very quickly, you don't really think about it. So also you create an angel. Right? But this angel will be, might have a broken leg, might have an eye missing, might be just very weak and very feeble. Right? It depends on how you do the mitzvah. The same thing when we do a transgression. If we do a transgression with our full might and everything else, so great. I mean, not great, but you create this negative angel, right? If you did it really well, this transgression, God forbid, then you create this real powerful black angel, we'll call it. If you did the transgression because you were, you listened to evil inclination, you really didn't mean to do it, you did it by accident, so he'll be weaker. It depends how he did it, why he did it, where he was holding at the time. Depends on a lot of factors. The point is over here that the Vilna Gaon says that we create angels when we do whatever we do. Now that would make sense. After 120 years, that God is going to judge a person for whatever they did, right? So God is going to say, okay, bring up all the actions that he did, right? And the actions are going to come up. How is he going to do that? Because every action that he did created an angel. Just like, we couldn't imagine this, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, like things are actually being recorded now as we see on this video. So now we can imagine that happens. Right? You do something good, you create a certain angel. Then, you do something bad, you create a certain angel also. So then God's going to say, okay, bring out all his mitzvahs. So then all these angels, hopefully, are going to come out, some strong, some weaker, and they're going to give testimony that he did this at this time. He did this at that time. He did this at the other time. Right? And all these hundreds and hopefully thousands and millions of angels come out. And then God will say, bring out, his transgressions. And then you get these black angels that come out, some stronger, some weaker, right? And that's what judgment is. It's like a scale, like this, going back and forth, good, bad, depends on what we did. And then God's going to look at all the actions, and then God is going to decide how he's going to judge it. But, before 100 years ago, we couldn't imagine this, even though the Vilna Gaon speaks about it, and other great rabbinical authorities speak about it. So we still have to believe that, it's going to happen, and that's going to be, in the next world after 120 years, what's going to be. Now, fast forward 100 years. Now we have, cameras that can record, phones that can record, etc. You have, even before that, you had tape recorders, which don't really exist anymore, right? You had videos, 8-tracks don't exist anymore. You had, VHS, etc. So now things have, advanced, so to speak. But we do have an idea how that could possibly happen. Because, as the Vilna Gaon says, whatever you do is going to create either a positive angel or a negative angel. Whatever we do in this world is going to be recorded, and God is going to judge it. It wouldn't be fair if God said, well, I don't remember exactly what you did over here, and on this day, and on this minute, or whatever. God's got all his messengers. And all his messengers are set up to record exactly what you do. Which is, in and of itself, a scary thing. If we actually lived this idea, then we would look different. We would do things different, right? Just when you thought, it was, peace and quiet in the bathroom, right? You don't even have that. You're being followed everywhere in everything that you do. And that's going to be recorded upstairs. However, God's going to judge it. But you see, he's going to call in all the witnesses. He's not going to judge it just out of thin air. He's going to say, okay, name, fine, bring out all his actions, let's go. Right? As we mentioned before in previous videos, that's what a person sees at the beginning. After he dies, he sees a video, so to speak, of everything he did, right? He sees his life flash before his eyes. Right? The second video the Zohar says he's going to see is what he potentially could have done. Nonetheless, we have to understand, as the Vilna Gaon says, everything that we do creates a angel, right? Positive and negative. So that's one idea. That's one idea that we see by him sending, by Yaakov sending these angels. We also see another idea, and that is that Yaakov is terrified of meeting his brother because he understands his brother wants to kill him, and his brother hates him, etc. So he made God promise twice that he was going to protect him and that he would take care of him and nothing bad with him. He was so terrified that he split up his camp. That the second part of the camp he let go one way, and the first part of the camp went another way. So if God forbid Esav came to the camp, he wouldn't kill everybody, right? There'd still be a group that would be able to survive. And this is what the Avot Chaim said before the war. He said, based on this, that if God forbid, that there's destruction, of the Jewish people in a certain place, right? I guess he was alluding to the destruction of European Jewry. Nonetheless, he learns from here that even though in Europe, let's say, God forbid, the Jews are going to be destroyed, which is what happened, they're going to exist somewhere else. In other words, they're going to exist in a place that they'll be able to survive. So how do we know? Because Avot Chaim says we learn this out from Yaakov. Because Yaakov said that if I allow Esav, if I bring everybody together, Esav could just wipe everybody out. And therefore, obviously, that would be bad, because if he did that, we wouldn't be here. Right? Jewish people certainly wouldn't be here. So the Avot Chaim said, if God forbid there's ever a tragedy, like that, if God would decide to destroy Jews in Europe, there'll be Jews in Australia that'll survive. There'll be Jews in somewhere else, in America, in South America, wherever it is, that will survive. That's one thing. Another thing is, what does he do? He tries to bribe him, right? There are three things Rashi says that Yaakov does, right? He sends him a gift, right? He sends him a gift, he prays, and he prepares himself for war. So, prayer always helps. You always need prayer. If the gift idea doesn't work, i.e., he doesn't get bribed, so then he'll fight him, right? Fighting is the last resort, right? He doesn't want to have to go through that if he doesn't have to. So he sends him a gift because Esav is Molei Taiva. He is full of desire, and he wants everything in the physical world. So Esav, or that's the exile we're in now, Edom, because at the end of the Torah portion, he's called Edom, because he was red when he came out. So he's called Edom, the last exile. Fourth exile, the Jewish people, is the exile of Edom, which hasn't ended yet. May it end speedily in our days. So Edom represents the Western world. That's what Edom represents today, as the Western world. And first thing he does is he tries to bribe him, because Esav has a price. So there's a famous story. With the Avot Chaim. There was a certain decree that was made against the Jewish people. And the Avot Chaim called one of his disciples, and he told him, here, take this money. Get together a tremendous amount of money, and I want you to go and I want you to bribe the king. Now, you have to understand, the Jewish people are in tremendous fear. There's a tremendous decree made against them. And the Avot Chaim says, I want you to take a huge sum of money, and I want you to go bribe the king. And his student says, he's going to kill me. If I go there to try and bribe him, to try and get rid of this decree, he's going to kill me. So the Avot Chaim tells him, don't worry about it. Take a lot of money, go to him, and bribe him. And that will take care of the problem. So the student wasn't so happy, but he did what his Rebbe told him to do. he gathered a lot of money, takes this huge sack, goes to the king, gets an audience with the king, and he says, I come in the name of the Jewish people, you made this decree, this unfair decree, and we want this decree revoked. And he takes the sack and he puts it down on the table. Bam! Right? Puts it down on the table. So, all these coins and silver and rubies and jewelry and all this stuff. King looks inside, and he looks at this Jew, and he says, you know who I am? You know what I do? You think you can bribe the king? Who do you think you are? He said, I could have you killed right now. Get out of here. And the Jew runs, and takes the money, runs, and, escapes, with an inch of his life. He comes back to the Avot Chaim, and he says, Rebbe, I did what you told me to do, but I barely got out alive. He didn't take the bribe, and, I'm sorry, I did what I could. Avot Chaim says, I told you, give him a ton of money. Go back, take a lot more money, go and have this decree revoked. So his student said, I can't do that. If I walk in that door, he's going to kill me. Avot Chaim said, just do what I told you to do. Get a ton of money, go there, and take care of it. The student is petrified. Goes back to the king. Knocks on the door slowly. King lets him in. And again, he gives over the same thing. And he says, I want this decree against the Jewish people revoked. And this is the price I'm willing to pay. And now he's got a huge sack, double the size, more money, more jewels, etc. And he places it down. King looks inside. And he looks at him. He starts yelling and screaming. He goes, who do you think you are? I should have killed you the first time. You got to be crazy to try and think you can bribe the king to get what you want and all this and all that. And he runs. He flees. Right? He escapes with an inch of his life. Takes his big sack. Is walking back. And is totally broken. Comes back to the Avot Chaim. Tells him what happened. The Avot Chaim looked at him and he said, I told you. Give him a ton of money. Go back and finish the job. The guy's petrified. He escaped twice. He's lucky to be alive. So fine. He's got now he comes back, takes, 3 sacks of gold, all these rubies, all, whatever. He triples what he gave him, what he was going to give him before. And he goes in again. Knock, knock on the door, very feeble, and he goes in, and the king looks at him, and the king says, what are you doing here? He says, I should have had you killed the first time. I had a little bit of mercy on you, and I let you go. I came a second time, you came a second time, I really should have killed you, tortured you, everything else, I let you go. So he says, what are you doing here? So he takes these 3 sacks, bam, puts them on the table. The table almost collapses because of how much money is there. Right? How many rubles and gold and coins and all that. And he says, I want you to rescind and get rid of this decree, this bad decree against the Jewish people. The king looks at the money, the gold, the silver, all the jewels. Looks in all the bags. Looks at the Jew. Looks at all the bags. Doesn't say a word, by the way. Looks at the Jew. Looks back at all the bags. Jew doesn't know what's going on here. He's looking at me. He's looking at the bags. Looking at me. Looking at the bags. He's going back and forth. And the king says, okay, fine. I'll, taken care of. Writes out a thing. Fine. This decree is totally nullified. Go on your way. Go home. And this Jew can't believe it. He thought he was going to die twice. And now he got the decree rescinded. He comes back to the Avot Chaim in a great mood. And he told the Avot Chaim, he said, Rebbe, he said, you'll never believe what happened. He said, I took the Rebbe's advice, and I took 3 times the more amount and all this and all that, and he rescinded the decree. He said, how did you know? He said, how did you know? How did the Rav know that I could do that. He says, you don't understand. He says, Yaakov bribed Esav. He said, it's in their bones. They're Edom. Edom can be bribed. When he came back the first time, I knew for sure you didn't give him enough money. When he came back the second time, it wasn't even, I didn't even have a thought about it. Because it must have been, it had nothing to do with how you spoke or what you tried to do. It had to do with how much money was there. So his student said, yeah, the third time I brought all this money, and he sat there, looked at the money, looked at me, looked at the money, and that was it. He said, yeah, because he can be bribed. Esav can be bribed. So the Avot Chaim got a tremendous decree, rescinded against the Jewish people, because he understood the nature of Esav. The nature of Esav is he can be bought. And that's the first thing that Yaakov does. Right? He does three things. He's got that, he's got prayer, and he's got war. If God forbid, he's going to pray anyway, but if God forbid these two things don't work, so he's willing to go to war. But the first thing is you try and bribe him. Because Esav takes bribes. And that's what Edom does. And therefore the Avot Chaim said, you didn't give him enough. It was clear you didn't give him enough. Because if you would have given enough on the first time, would have worked like that. Because we have a makor. We have a source of that being true. That source of being true is the story of what Yaakov does. Now, if we go a little bit further, we look at verse 8. In verse 8, the Torah says, that Yaakov became frightened, he divided the camps, etc. And then he tells Esav, what does he tell him? He tells him that he lived with Lavan. Right? In verse 5. In verse 5 he says, to my lord Esav, so said your servant Yaakov, I have sojourned with Lavan and lingered until now. Right? Why does he tell him that he lived with Lavan? What does this have to do with anything? So Rashi says, Lavan garti and taryag mitzvah shamarti. He says, with Lavan I lived, but I guarded all the 613 commandments. Now, we have to understand, why does he tell him that? Not only that, why would Esav care? Again, even if you tell me that Esav grew up in the house of Yitzchak and he still remembers what spirituality is, he doesn't care now. Doesn't mean anything to him now. So Yaakov says, you have to understand, I lived with Lavan, the greatest, or one of the greatest swindlers in the history of man. And he tells him, I guarded all the commandments. Now, one of the things we learn out here, there are a number of things, but one main point that I want to mention is that he shows he's wealthy also. Even though he lived with Lavan, he got great wealth, right? He got a tremendous amount of wealth. But Lavan tricked him many times. And he kept changing his mind on different things, and he wasn't at all honest with Yaakov. So one of the things we learn is the fact that there's an obvious difference between Ruchnius and Gashmius, between spirituality in the physical world. In the physical world, it could be we're willing to do things we don't necessarily want to do, right? But at the same time, if it helps us, with livelihood or other things, we're willing to do it. If you have to do something lowly, but you're going to make a lot of money doing it, so you say, the ends justify the means. So who cares to get a little bit dirty or whatever? I'm willing to do it because I'm going to make a ton of money. So we're willing to make ourselves look bad in that sense, to do what to do what we need to do in the physical world. But you see, when it comes to spirituality is a different ballgame. Spirituality, I don't move from left to right. Spirituality means that even though I live with Lavan was a sorcerer, Lavan was a liar, Lavan was a crook and a criminal and is corrupt and everything else, nonetheless, he had no influence spiritually on Yaakov whatsoever. In other words, whatever he did, and he lied and he cheated and this and that, Yaakov remained as he did. Meaning, he remained strong in his spiritual endeavors, even though he was by Lavan for 20 years. And Lavan had no effect on him. So too, he says to Esav, you think you're any better? You think you're any mightier than Lavan? Lavan's pretty bad. Right? We say it by the Haggadah. Also, tried to uproot everything. Right? In every generation we have someone who tries to do that, or many who try and do that, and God saves us from them. So Esav, you think you're so great? You think you're so tough? You think you're going to come and just wipe everything out and have a negative influence on me or my kids or my wives or whatever? I don't think so. You know why? Because the greatest swindler in the history of man couldn't touch me. And if he can't touch me, all the more so, you can't touch me as well. So one thing we learn through that this teaches us for all future generations is that the physical world is something I have to be a part of. It's something that I have no choice. Right? We're born against our will. We die against our will. As the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, tells us. But I have to live in this world. Right? So whatever I have to do for the sake of livelihood, fine. That's what I have to do. That's not who I am. That's not what I represent. Because anyone who works, the minute they're done working and they don't have to do whatever they need to do for livelihood, as a Jew, you have an obligation to learn. That's the only permissibility that if you're not going to sit and learn all day, right, because you'll say, if I sit and learn all day, I'm not going to make any money. I won't be able to support my family. So you're allowed to go to work. Thing is, when you go to work, and you're busy at work, so you're exempt from learning. Because you're busy supporting yourself and your family. But see, the minute you're done, regardless, your wife had a hard day or whatever the case is, and, the kids were this and kids were that, she has to send you out to go learn. Right? That's her portion in Torah. You're tired, you're this, you're that. Doesn't matter. Because the only permissibility to work is because you need money to live. And if you're not working, so then you have an obligation to learn. And if you don't, and if you claim what I'm doing is really for work, but it really isn't, then you're going to be held accountable for wasting time when I could have done that instead of learning Torah. So that's a major, that's a major idea we could speak about, quite a bit. I'll just mention one thing, and that is we have to put our best effort in what we do when it comes to livelihood. You have to put your best foot forward. God's going to do the rest. If you try and take more than what is fitting for you to have, you're going to lose out. Now, what does that mean? Let's say you think you're gonna make more money, right? You're going to try and make more than what really you deserve, right? So the Gemara says that you're guaranteed a certain amount of money from Rosh Hashanah. It's decreed. It can change, but it's basically decreed from Rosh Hashanah that you're going to make a certain amount of money during the year. Now, that's not going to change no matter how many hours extra I work, because if I think I'm going to make more money, let's say you work all these extra hours, you make, let's say, $120,000 after taxes, right? That's what, that's what you make. But let's say there was a decree made, right, from Rosh Hashanah to the next Rosh Hashanah that you're only going to make 80. So what happens to that $40,000 that you worked so hard for? It's going to get lost. The $40,000, you might have medical expenses, you might have car expenses, you might have, house expense, whatever it is, the money you thought you were going to gain, you actually lose. So what that means is, so you say, well, I really made $120,000 after taxes. No. When you add in everything else that you lost out, meaning, again, either doctor's bills, dentists, or whatever the case is, or things that broke or you lost or whatever the case is, and you deduct that from the money you made after taxes, that's the money you were supposed to have. So it's regardless of what you were of how much you tried to gain and what you tried to grab, you don't end up having it. The reason you don't end up having it is because it's offset. Now, so that means so the question is going to be, does that mean I have to work less? Or I should do the minimal. So, that's the whole question. However much effort you're going to put in, right? God's going to give you whatever He gives you, and then deduct whatever you don't deserve. Now, if nothing goes wrong during the year, which is just about an impossibility, but if nothing goes wrong, then that's what you were supposed to have. But if we try and take that which we don't deserve, we're going to work more and do this and do that, then you're going to end up losing out. You're going to end up losing out somewhere else. So the obvious question then is, how much effort do I have to put in? So that the idea would be to make the best effort in something which, a lot of people are looking for that today, to make the most money in the least amount of time. Or it allows you a flexible schedule, which probably most things don't, but it allows you a flexible enough schedule that you have time to learn. That's the ideal. Practically speaking, it's a whole different, it's a whole different story. But if a person would be looking into a profession, and in certain professions may take longer to train or whatever, but in certain professions you might be able to pick your own hours or make the hours more user friendly to learning Torah. That's what you should do. Because the essence of what we're doing here is to learn and to better ourselves. The only permissibility to work is to put bread on the table. When I don't work, I have to be learning. So then the question would be, okay, let's say it takes you 40 minutes to get back and forth. Right? Sit in traffic and whatever. It takes you a while to get back and forth, whereas most people have to have to commute. So what does a person listen to while they're commuting? They're listening to the news, they're listening to sports, or are they listening to an inspiring MP3 or tape if you still have them and can still listen to them? Because you might say, okay, do I really have to take it that far? Can't I just have downtime? Yeah, you can have downtime. But the question is, what's going to happen after 120 years? And God, let's say, takes you to task. And says, but, look at all these things you could have listened to. Back and forth. Okay. You were tired, you were this, you were that. Better to listen to the news and how many people, got killed or, accidents or the weather or, what's going on in sports. Take my Louisville Slugger, whatever it is. Again, we're only here for a short amount of time. We have to ask ourselves on a regular basis, which we don't, but we should, and that is this good for me or is it not good for me? If it's not good for me, I shouldn't do it. See, but it's fun. Desire is fun. I was just listening to something today, and someone got the question, do you like living in Jerusalem? Is it fun? Sorry. Is it fun living in Jerusalem? And this rabbi said, it was one of the few times they've ever been tongue-tied. Like what do you answer to that? So, yeah, I love getting, almost run over by buses trying to get on. I love getting cut in line, in the bank, and I like this. I like, different things that, can potentially annoy a person, by the a little bit of the harshness, of living in Israel. Nonetheless, he says, is that what life is? He says, living in Jerusalem is fun. Like, what are you doing? Like playing bridge is fun in the Holy Land, so it's funner because you're in the Holy Land? He says, like, it was a strange, it's a strange question, which brings up the idea, well, why can't I have fun? I'm only here for a short amount of time, like the prophet Isaiah, eat, drink, and marry, lest tomorrow I die. Well, that may be true, but there's an obligation, to serve God to the best of your ability. Every day, in the morning, afternoon, night, that's where your obligation is. God doesn't want you to forget about Him. Can I relax? Kick my feet back? Yeah, there is something to downtime. The problem is that most people's downtime are what other people do for fun. Meaning we may think we need to relax with, you fill in the blank. Whatever it is. But, it's enjoyment. It's entertainment. See, and we'll speak about this in greater depth, when we speak about Hanukkah, because it fits in really there. But entertainment and everything in that world is all fantasy. It's all make-believe. It doesn't really matter. And at the end of the day, does it make me a better person? It's a little bit of a rough question. Because there are plenty of things we enjoy. And that are pleasing to the senses. But who in the world says it's good for my soul? Am I better off, now, after the fact than I would have been before? Has it helped me in my connection to God or not? Because that's really what we're living for. I do something good, draws me closer. I do something bad, it draws me further away. That's what the relationship is. That's what the purpose of life is. Problem is, the rest of the world lives in fantasy. Right? It's not about the next movie coming out, or how much it sells, or it flops, or all this other stuff that's out there. Knowing that information, I'm a better person? I don't think so. Does it give you corrupt value? Certainly could. You're going to say, but can't I differentiate? Can't I filter it? I'm stronger. It's not a question of being stronger or not. Even if things, we're not living in Victorian England anymore. Just in case anyone had noticed. But people give their own perspective on things. How to look at things. How to define history. Through documentaries and other things. But remember, history is his story. How he gives it over. Their biases. Is it making me better? Not sure. I don't think so. You can say, but a person gonna live so sheltered, can't know what's going on. Don't worry. If there's a war, everyone's gonna know. And everything, going on today, especially in the Holy Land and other places, everyone knows instantaneously. Right? Minutes after was already video posted. We're not lacking in that. What we're lacking is the fortitude to say, I don't need it. And it's not like it's not entertaining. And it's not like it's not fun. But see, Torah's not about fun. I mean, if you learn it the way it should be, and you get into the deepness of what it means and whatever, yeah, it's tremendously enjoyable. It's hard work. Hard on the brain. Well, nothing greater than that. Because at the end of the day, everything else is fantasy. It's like just one long soap opera, just different seasons. In the spring we do this. In the fall we do this. We follow this, that, and the other thing. It's just, you're just being strung along. By whatever society throws at you. But you say, but I have to be part of that world. You're right. So if we work and we're part of that world, that's one thing. But you're only part of the world for one reason. You're putting food on the table. That mean I should delve into all the garbage that's part of it? Like someone once said, this is when I was 15, 16 years old. Now, I was at camp. I heard someone say that you have to experience everything at least once. You go in this world once, it's being very philosophical at the time. And it's like, you have to experience everything once. So I said, I don't think that's true. I said, why not? So I said, well, if I take, if a person takes, 60, 70 steps backwards, you go outside and you run full speed, straight into the bunk, straight into the bunk. Bam! Break every bone in your body. I don't have to do that. I don't have to experience that to know it's not good for me. I gave some other esoteric, examples, but, said, no, you're taking it to a different extreme. You just said, I need to experience everything once. And people want to experience things because they want to see what it feels like and whatever. Again, people won't say I have to experience everything. Right? It's a little bit, it's a little bit exaggerated, but to say, how can you not know or try something or whatever, even if maybe, we're not talking, let's say it's a physical danger to a person. Why shouldn't you try it? Well, maybe because it's not good for you. Maybe, you say that, you have to be more open-minded. I said, yeah, as long as your brains don't fall on the floor, right? To experience everything. Someone once told me that, Orthodox Jews are so insular, etc., got to send your kids to university, and they have to learn, more things, and they have to be more open-minded. I said, as open-minded as you are. So I said, of course. I'm tremendously open-minded. I give my kids free reign. They can choose this or choose that. I said, let me ask you, take your two boys. I said, I want you to send them to yeshiva. I said, I'll send my kids to university. You send your two boys to yeshiva. This person turned around and said, oh, I would never do that. I would never do that. Oh, so you're not as open-minded as you thought. You just, you'll be open-minded to a point. The question is, where do you differentiate that point? Where do you draw the line? Well, at least I'm a good person. What's your definition of good? It's human made, not divine made. So everything depends on what I feel. So your goodness may be euthanasia. Pull the plug because you don't want this person to suffer anymore. Mercy killing. That's for his own good. Really? You decide what quality of life is? That's really what's good? I don't think that's how the world works. You don't have a right to take life. God gives life, and then when he decides, he'll take it. Send any number of messengers to do that. See, the idea is that when God created the world, and he spoke to the heavenly throne, the heavenly hosts, and he said, let us make man in our image. Right? Go back to Genesis. In the 6th day, God says, let us make man in our image. He didn't say that man should make God in his image. That's what we do. That's what many do. Want to change the Torah, flip it around, turn it into a pretzel. If I feel like doing it, fine. If I don't feel like doing it, it's also fine. Whatever the case is. But see, if Torah is absolute, and it comes from God, then what we're doing is making God in our own image. That's called idolatry. And the reason it's called idolatry is because you're giving yourself a force that it doesn't have. You're not worshiping yourself per se. But what you're saying is, I make God in my own image. What is that? That's called Torah in my own image. Torah made in, X place, wherever you are. That's not what Torah is. Torah is not about changing it into a pretzel. Torah is by living what God wants us to do. And there are repercussions, which we didn't even speak about. But here, Yaakov says, I live with Lavan. So, okay, I saw the physical world, but I sanctified it. That's a major difference between Judaism and Christianity. Judaism says take the physical and sanctify it. Right? I take an apple, I make a blessing. I bring heavenly influence on all apple trees, etc. when I make the blessing. Forget Kabbalah. If not, then the opposite. Because according to the Christians, everything's bad. This world is bad. And it's evil. Yeah, we are bad per se, but we have the opportunity to be great people, to strive, to want more, to desire more, to get close to him. That's what God wants. Is it easy? By no means. So mitzvahs are the diamonds in this world. We take as many as we can, before we leave, because that's all we have. And that's what God is going to judge. What we did, how we did it, and what the repercussions of that are. So Yaakov says to Esav, you think you're so great? You think you're so mighty? You think you're going to have such influence on me? I live with Lavan, the biggest corrupt criminal that existed. I used the physical world because I had to. But you see, he didn't touch me in spirituality. And you're not going to touch me either. You can do what you want. You can throw things at me. You can, try and have me go one way or the other. I'm going to stick to Torah. Because the only thing that lasts and that is eternal is Torah mitzvahs. Anyone interested? You can take a look at my Facebook fan page at Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism. my blog at rabbichaimcoffman.blogspot.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN, because that's how my father spelled it, .blogspot.com. Everyone have a great Shabbos.